Mike, I've been looking forward to this for almost a year now, so I feel privileged to finally have the opportunity to sit with you for a block of time without the bell going to ring and disturb our conversation, that we can have this finally.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
I'm going to ask you to identify yourself for the record and give us your full name.
Okay. Charles Michael Campanile, familiarly Mike Campanile.
Mm-hmm. And I see I've already learned something. I never knew that that was your first name.
Many of my friends say, "Who is Charles? Charles? Charles who?" And so it's a surprise to many of my friends.
First of all, tell me, where did Charles come from? Who named you Charles?
Charles was the most popular name in my family, both on my mother's and father's side. Grandfather, father, I had 2 Uncle Charlies, a cousin Charles, and so I grew up being Charles. And when I was about 2 years old, my Aunt Rose started to call me Charles Michael. And there were so many Charleses in my family that I just evolved into Michael, I think so that they wouldn't be confused, or I wouldn't be confused. And it just evolved that way.
Were there also during those years large family gatherings, and a lot of the relatives were there?
Right,
It's perfectly logical to me.
So I became Michael. And I'm comfortable with
Who
that.
was Michael? Where did Michael
Michael
come
was
from?
my mother's father.
Okay.
And Charles was my father's father.
Aha.
The other way around. The other way around.
All right, so you carry a
Oh,
lot,
yes,
you carry a lot there.
It's an Italian tradition to be named after grandfathers. Yes.
Did you know your grandfathers?
Yes. My mother's father, I knew, but not very well, because he never learned to speak English. So he was always there, but the grandchildren didn't become close to him. My father's father I knew quite well, although he was still a patriarchal figure, and he would kiss the grandchildren as they came in, and then spent most of the time with the adults after that. But I knew both of them.
Did they both, were they both born in this country?
No, they were both born in Italy.
I figured when you said one person never spoke English,
Yes.
what part of Italy was he born?
My
This is your mother's.
My mother's father, and both my mother's father and mother were born in Naples. And my father's mother and father were born in Bari.
Oh, way down south.
Yep.
Have you been to both places or
No,
either place?
not yet, but it's
on the
not too
agenda.
far in the future.
Okay,
Yes, we
wonderful.
hope.
Oh, that would be great. That would be great. Where did you spend most of your time growing up? Was it evenly divided between both families, or was it mostly one side of the family?
Well, until I was in the 8th grade, I lived in the same town as my father's mother and father. That was Beacon, up in the Hudson Valley. And I lived there until I was, as I said, in the 8th grade. My sister was 2 years younger than I. My mother's family came from New Jersey, Plainfield and Scotch Plains area, not too far from the city. So, although we visited the Plainfield, the New Jersey relatives on a monthly basis, I guess I would spend more time with my father's mom and dad.
Mike, what county is that? The Clinton now. I mean, up in the valley.
Dutchess.
In
That's
Dutchess
County. It's
Okay.
southern Dutchess County.
Okay.
Yeah, right across from Newburgh.
Do you still have family up in that part of the state?
No.
No.
No, I don't. No. Actually, we were the only ones of our family. My mother and my grandmother and grandfather and my immediate family were the only ones there. And my dad was transferred to Massachusetts, to a little village in Massachusetts, about 30 miles from Boston. When I was in 8th grade, my sister was in 6th, and I spent my high school and college years in Massachusetts.
Since you bring up your dad, what work did he do that he was transferred?
My dad was worked for a company, Cardiganer and Company, that at one time was the world's largest manufacturer of ladies' hats. He was in the millinery business. And his mother had a small hat shop of her own, an exclusive hat shop of her own, and in Brooklyn, where they grew up. And my grandfather loaned Mr. Cardiganer some of the money to start the business.
Whoa.
And so my dad worked for them until he went into the Army in '42. And when he came out of the Army, he was in the Army Air Corps Aviation Mechanic Division. And some people thought that it might be a good idea to go work for IBM in Poughkeepsie when he came out of the armed services. And my dad didn't make the move and just stayed with the hat company and
Questions
worked
are
for them
spinning
for the
around.
rest.
There's so many things I wanted to ask you now that you've mentioned that. Were you aware of what work your grandparents had been involved in before they came to this country? Was there any connection with what the family did when they came here?
Yes, yes. On my father's family side, they were involved in hats and haberdashery.
Ah, there it is. Okay.
And so they continued to do that. My grandmother.
I take it that they had been successful in that.
Yes, they were, especially my grandmother. My grandmother was the real successful and creative
was the
and
artist.
artistic one. Yes, she was. And she owned, she built up and owned an exclusive hat shop in Bari before the war, and then came here. And
Did she come
continued.
before the war? She was able to get out?
She came before the war. My grandfather came first, then my father, and then my grandmother with my father and one sister and one brother.
Wow, what a story. There's a whole other tale. Did they come in through New York Harbor?
They came in through New York Harbor. I don't know very much about their first voyage over, but when the war broke out, my grandmother took the children back to Bari. And I'm not exactly sure why they went back, but they went back indeed, and they waited until the end of the war. My father remembers seeing the Kaiser come down one of the boulevards in Bari during the war. Must have been early in the war, of course.
Yes.
And then they came back to this country at the end of the war. And they came back through Ellis Island, and my father's proud that they came. They sailed on the Giuseppe Verdi, and he remembers that time in his life, and he's shared it with us frequently. And then, so they were brand new Americans when they came at the end of the war, and
they weren't alone at that point. There were many other people coming to this country at the same time. Have you been to Ellis Island?
Yes, I have, and I've seen pictures of the ship that they came
How wonderful.
over, and I'm not sure I would have felt comfortable on that little boat, but yes, quite moving, Ellis Island is.
Did you mentioned that you very early on got the name Michael, and you've told us why. Was Mike your only nickname, or did you have other nicknames that the family?
No,
terms
that was
of
about
affection,
it.
or that's it?
Although my mother reversed the letters and sometimes
In the
called
spelling
me,
of the name?
Yes, and called me Ecom sometimes, but not very often.
Okay.
But
that was a
it.
mom thing.
Yeah, that was a mom thing.
Yeah.
And I think she outgrew that when I was quite young. But I remember her calling me that.
Mike, I'm anxious to ask you about your family situation today. You live fairly close because you have been making the commute to Brentwood even this year. So you're close enough to do that. Where do you live, and who's in the family today with you?
Okay, Martha and I, my wife Martha, I nicknamed her Martha Music because she's a music teacher. She and I live in Patchogue, on the same street as John Callan and Bob Frankel.
Okay.
And Ron Guzes used to live there. And our daughter is getting married at the end of the summer. She works for IBM in Essex Junction, Vermont, in northern Vermont.
And which daughter is this now?
This is Christine,
Christine,
our daughter
okay.
Christine. And Michael, our son, unfortunately passed away about 5 years
and
ago.
I remember that terrible
And-
tragedy. Yeah.
And so it was just the four of us.
Yeah.
And Martha's retired as well. She began here in Brentwood in 1967 at Southeast School and taught for 7 years in Brentwood in elementary music until the children came. And then when she returned to teaching, although her first choice was to come back to Brentwood, it was at the end of the 70s, and there weren't many jobs at that time. As you remember, we went a long time without hiring very many teachers. So she found a job in Sachem, about 15 minutes from the house, and she retired from Sachem last spring.
How did you meet? How did you guys meet?
We met at college.
Okay.
Martha was a waitress in the dining room, and being one of the prettier waitresses, my dorm mates and I made it a point of sitting at her table. And even though I didn't know it at the time, but even though I was lactose intolerant, we kept ordering milk over and over again, and we kept drinking milk. And I never figured out why I was upset. My stomach was upset at the end of the meal, but that's how I struck up a relationship with her.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's great. What school was that, by the way?
This was Eastern Nazarene College, John,
Okay.
up in Quincy, Massachusetts, just south of Boston.
Did you do your undergraduate work
Yeah,
there?
we did
Both of you
undergrad.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
And then we both, I got a National Science Foundation grant in '69 to get my master's degree at Western Michigan University in math. And so we spent 3 summers there, and the tuition was so inexpensive that Martha got her master's in music and performance and music education at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So we both got our master's from there.
And she used the music all as a teacher primarily. Did she perform at any time during her?
No, but her forte is choral conducting.
I see.
And although she's an excellent pianist, she has conducted our church choir for 15 or 20 years,
There
and she
it is.
conducts a couple of community choirs in Suffolk County.
Which leads me to ask you if you see in the children any of the interests, hobbies, qualities, personality traits that you and your wife, or perhaps even the previous generation, evidenced.
Well, musically, they both were very talented musically. My daughter was an all-state cellist, and my son was an accomplished cellist. He was an all-state alternate, and even after practicing as much as a jock that he would practice, he was a very excellent cellist and first chair in the orchestra. Mathematically, my father was a whiz at numbers.
Was he?
And he did things in his head that I still can't do.
Gosh.
And my son and my daughter, I think, acquired it. I'd like to believe that they acquired it from me, but I think they acquired it from Grandpa. And my son especially was very talented in math and floored his grandmother. He used to be the banker. My grandmother, I'm sorry, his grandmother, my
Yes.
wife's mother,
Yes.
took care of them, especially Michael, when Martha went back to work, when Michael was 3 and 4. And he used to be the banker in Monopoly, and he used to be the banker in the Game of Life. And she tried to trick him and asked him, Michael John, and he was still in his booster seat, he was about 4, at the kitchen table, and she said, "I've got you. What's 54 times 6?" And he rolled his eyes and said 324. And so she was flabbergasted by that. But I think he got it from his grandfather, not his father, though.
So it does continue. It does
Yeah,
continue along.
yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It's nice.
I'm going to put my glasses on again, Mike,
Okay.
because I knew I would have problem if I took them off. The family contact is obviously ongoing because you are all, I mean, you're together.
Mm-hmm.
Where were you born now? You told me, well, you told me you were born up along the Hudson, and in.
Actually, John, I was born in Plainfield, in Jersey.
Oh, you were?
Yeah.
Okay.
But my dad, but we moved when I was just an infant.
Under 3 years old?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
under 3 years old. I don't remember living in Plainfield.
You
at
don't
all.
have?
No.
So your earliest childhood memories
We're
would
from
have
Beacon,
been
up in Dutchess
up in
County.
Beacon and Dutchess County.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I lived there until I was in 8th grade.
Mike, if you can, reach back. Give me one or two of those earliest memories that you can take hold of.
Well, you know, for a boy who loves sports, you know, playing Little League baseball, of course, were thrills. And but I think one of the things that is most impressionable on me was the 6 or 8 acres that we had in our backyard surrounding our house. And even though they didn't belong to us, my sister and I and our friends treated it as our own, and just living in the outdoors, you know, just being carefree and
Do you remember the seasons up there, the different seasons? Do you have different
yes.
recollections of winter and
I remember vividly the blizzard of '47, and you know, the
yes.
child's book about was it Katie the snowplow? And I remember the snowplow coming through and plowing out our street, you know, and thinking, you know, of the book.
We haven't had too many snowfalls like that since,
No.
throughout the rest of our lives.
No, we haven't.
That was a memorable one in my
Yeah.
life as well.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Yeah.
There are most of our Rob's colleagues, John, can remember the '47 one, but if we walk out into the hall today and look at the staff at Brentwood High School, they'd look at us with funny eyes. But John, I just thought of a memory. I was playing Little League baseball, and I guess it was either '56 or '57, and you remember the Mad Bomber from
Yes.
New York City who terrorized the city.
Yes.
And, well, he had gone to trial and was convicted and was going to be incarcerated at Matawan State Hospital, which is in Beacon. It's a hospital for the criminal insane. And we knew he was coming up this particular day. And the long entrance to Matawan ran adjacent to the Little League field.
Oh.
And we saw the parade of state trooper cars, and everything stopped at the Little League game, and we all turned and we watched. We were sure, we didn't see him, of course,
Yes.
but we were sure that was the cavalcade for the Mad Bomber.
There's
I don't know why I remembered that just now, John. It could be the lights.
That's one of those things that just comes back.
I don't know. So the Mad Bomber made an impression on me.
What did your mother, we spoke of her a little earlier, what did your mother love to do? What was she passionate about?
My mom was a naturalist. I don't mean a nudist. I mean, she loved the outdoors. I think I got my love of outdoors from her. Mm-hmm. She loved natural foods.
She was ahead of her time.
Oh,
way
yes, she
ahead of her
was. And she shunned technology. As a matter of fact, we didn't have a television set until I was in the 10th or 11th grade. But I watched plenty of television at my friend's house.
Yes.
And my dad and I had to do a lot of persuading before we could get a television set. So that was my mom. She's a very loving person, loved her family.
Was you say she loved the outdoors. Did she, I was going to say, did she like to walk? But then I realized of that generation, women had no time for
No, they didn't. They didn't
such
walk.
things.
No. She gardened.
Mm-hmm.
She loved to clean up the yard.
Yes. Did you have brothers and sisters, Mike?
Just one sister, 2 years younger.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you're the oldest
Yep.
of the children.
Yep.
And no doubt that has affected your perception of things as
Oh,
you
yes.
grew up.
Yeah, yeah. In an Italian family, the oldest, my sister will tell you that I was looked on with particular reverence, and of course, I will tell that she being the younger sister was protected under any condition, and I couldn't fight back to my sister, even though she was taking advantage of the situation.
So you were in one grade ahead of her, were you? Or
2 grades
Two
ahead.
grades ahead
Yeah,
of her?
she was 2 years younger. than I.
Okay, yes,
Yeah.
definitely the big brother protected, definitely.
Yeah.
That was it. What did she teach you, though? What has she taught you?
My mom.
Your sister.
Oh, my sister.
I'm sure you've taught her a lot of things, but what has she taught you?
Well, I think my sister taught me perseverance. My sister wasn't the best student in the world, although she was very talented. She was musically inclined much more than I am. And then when she went away to college, she went to a 2-year college, she just decided that I think I have an idea of what my life is going to be like. And she became an excellent teacher, an excellent student, and transferred to UMass, became an excellent student there, and became an excellent teacher. So,
Did I ask you before where you did your graduate work, Mike? I don't remember if I asked you.
yes, you did, John, in Michigan, at Western
Okay,
Michigan
I'm sorry. Yes,
University.
I did ask you that.
Yeah.
Listen, among the other adult influences besides your mom, dad, and your grandparents, were there other adults that had a formative influence on shaping Charles Michael?
Yes, John, of course, and I can think of two in particular. Actually, three. The mom and dad of three boys, classmates, and three brothers, neighbors that I spent a lot of time with in Beacon. Their mom and dad, he was a minister and she a minister's wife, and some of the things that that I couldn't do because my dad was working very hard, long hours. He had become the manager of the factory in Beacon, and of course, along with that went the responsibilities of being the first person into the factory and the last person out. So the parents, the mom and dad of my friends, included me in everything that they did. Although my mom took me to my first baseball game at Yankee Stadium.
So you were a Yankee fan?
Yes, I was a Yankee fan.
You're still a Yankee fan, aren't
Still a Yankee fan, although I think I'm more of a fan than a Yankee fan because I spent 8 or 9 years in Massachusetts, and I like the Red Sox.
Okay.
And I like the Mets. Both my children were avid Met fans, so
You're a fan of the game.
I
more
think
than
I'm a
anything
fan of the
else.
game,
Yes,
and
yes.
somebody would ask me who I was rooting for in a Mets Yankee game or a Red Sox Yankee game. I'm sure I could I know I couldn't tell them who I would
Yes.
really want to win.
Yes.
Although I must confess, in 1986, in the Red Sox-Mets World Series, I was rooting for the Mets. There was no doubt under those circumstances.
Your New York identity
Yes,
held
sure,
out for you.
yes.
Yes, it did.
And
Okay.
then Mr. Chick Sales, Albert Sales, was my high school math teacher for 3 years. We moved to a little community in Massachusetts, and I only had 44 in my graduating class. And I had one math teacher for 8th grade, one for 9th, and then Mr. Sales for 10, 11, and 12. And Mr. Sales was, in my opinion, students think that their teachers don't have a life. They're teachers, and if they see them in the supermarket, or if they see them in the movies, they really don't know how to handle it. I see the reaction of my of little children when they see my wife in a supermarket, and Mrs. Campanile is out of place.
Yes.
She should be
Yes.
behind the piano, or.
Yes.
But I saw Mr. Sales as being just a regular person and bright. He never talked down to any of us. He talked to us. He was a referee, a basketball referee, and they had the audacity to call off what would have been the winning basket in a Christmas tournament that one of my team's players scored because the player had gone through a walking violation just before the basket, and all of us knew that he was right. We weren't happy with the call, but he had the integrity to make that call, and he's the reason why I became a math teacher.
Is that right?
Yeah, Mr. Sales.
Do you find, or have you found over your professional life, Mike, that for some reason coaches make excellent teachers, and vice versa?
Oh, yes.
I mean, that very often it's the coaching experience that makes you the better teacher.
I agree with you,
Yeah,
John, and I
yeah.
can cite you a number of examples. My good friend Paul Koretsky and my good friend John Durant
Yes.
being two of the examples that I
Yes.
can cite you.
Yeah. Well, you anticipated a question that I was about to ask, and that is, who was it or how was it that you decided to pursue the career that you did? And you've told us.
Yeah.
The role of teachers in our lives, I don't think can be overestimated. And those particular teachers, if you're fortunate enough to have even a couple of them in your life, you've been blessed. And clearly you had one that entered your life at the right time.
Yep.
And helped to determine the course of the rest of your life.
He very definitely did.
Well, I'm going to move us along and take you down the path into another category of questions. Did you have chores to do? Well, there was a more important question I wanted to ask. Why is it that you didn't follow in your father's footsteps and follow in the family business that had for generations been the family business?
Well, it was very, that question is very easy to answer, John. My dad made sure that I worked in the hat factory the summer of my sophomore, junior, and senior year in high school. And working in the hat factory, doing repetitious brushing of hat bodies and moving these and this, and he didn't have to convince me, and I didn't have to convince myself. That showed me that I didn't want to do that.
Yes.
And I wasn't convinced that I was going to college. As a matter of fact, I talked with my mom and dad about going into the armed services because I wasn't really convinced what I wanted to do.
Right.
I enjoyed high school and got very good grades in high school, but I wasn't sure I wanted to continue.
Yeah, yeah.
But My dad knew what he was doing.
How old were you when you did know Mike?
When I did know that I
What
wanted
you
to become
wanted to do, yes.
I think I was 18.
Okay.
I think I was a senior in high school,
Wow.
and I think I knew at that time from Mr. Sales' example that I wanted to be a math teacher.
That's really early to know
Yeah,
something like that. So you became focused.
Oh, yeah,
From
yeah.
that point on, even in deciding upon your majors and all the
Absolutely,
rest. It was
John, I
all
knew.
within
Yeah.
that frame of reference.
Yeah. It was something that I enjoyed. It was something that I was fairly good at,
Yes.
and and Mr. Sales showed me that I could
From
have a
that
lot of
point
fun.
on, the
doing
pieces
it,
just
too.
fell into place,
Yes, they
and
did. Yeah.
you put them together.
Yeah.
Do you still have any contact with childhood friends from either elementary or high school or maybe even college? Have you stayed in touch with?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I had a nice long conversation with my high school friend Steve Dyan just yesterday evening. He lives on Cape Cod, and we've been in touch a couple of times a year. And I've been to a number of the high school reunions, and I still consider a lot of them my close friends.
It's probably obvious, but I think bears comment that when people have known you for that number of years, they can sometimes remind you of things about yourself that you've long since forgotten, and it's a wonderful resource to have.
Steve does that all
Yes.
the time. Yeah.
I think I started to ask you this question, and I moved away. Growing up, being the oldest, were there responsibilities that you were asked to take care of, or chores, for want of a better term, that you were expected to do?
John, my sister and I both had some things that we needed to do around the house, but we didn't. My mom wasn't the type. My mom was, as most of the moms back in the 50s were, she was an at-home mom.
That's right.
And so there weren't
Assigned tasks.
assigned
Right,
tasks.
Right.
There were things that we were asked to do, the typical things
There were
like
things
garbage
that you
and,
helped with.
and
Yeah.
shoveling
Okay.
snow and
Okay.
things like that. But
Or you
no,
offered to do, just
Yeah,
because you knew that the job needed to be done.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
but we lived in a small house, and we were a small family, and everything got done.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you remember your first paying job? I'm not talking about when you worked necessarily. Well, I don't know. Did your father pay you for working in the
Oh
factory?
yes,
he
yes.
did.
Oh yes. I was.
Was that the
I
first
punched.
paying job
I punched a card.
then? Okay.
I think my first paying job was my paper route.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a paper route.
And the name
Oh, yes, it
the
was.
Name
It
of
was
the
very
paper? The name of the paper
It was the Milford Daily News. 42 cents a week. No, I'm sorry, 45 cents a week. It was 7 cents a day for 6 days. There was no Sunday edition. And then the 3 cents, the additional 3 cents was supposed to go to the paper boy
Okay.
for each customer.
And you did this on foot or a bike?
On foot. On foot. I was fortunate. The town that I lived in only had about 4,000 people, and I happened to live in a cluster. It was an old mill town, and the mill used to own most of the houses. So the houses were relatively close together, and in the middle of the town was an apartment building. And I had about 100 customers, and about half of them were in this apartment building.
That's a lot of papers to carry.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Did you have to make several trips back to load up again?
No.
You carry them in a bag, right?
I carried them in a bag.
Yes.
Yeah. No,
And a
I
canvas
didn't.
bag on your shoulder.
That's right, canvas bag on my shoulder. And the apartment building was about 2.5 blocks from my house. So I started at my house and worked northwest. And within a half hour, I was down to about 30 papers. And so it wasn't too bad.
Now,
Yeah.
you would do this at what time in the morning? I assume
No, it was an
morning.
afternoon.
It was afternoon.
It was an afternoon paper.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was after school that
After
you
school.
go out.
Yeah.
All right. Rain or shine, snow
Yeah.
or sleet, you
That's
were out
right.
there. Okay.
And
There's
no
a-
parents, excuse me, John.
I was going to say there was a lesson of being responsible in that too, as well.
Oh yeah, you had to do it every day,
And people expected it to
and
be
they
there.
expected it, and they expected it to be on the porch. You know, if the porch was screened in and there was a screen door,
Yeah.
they expected it to be in at the door.
Yeah.
And oh yeah,
There's a generation of young people that don't have that kind of an opportunity to learn
No.
those values
No.
at this age. They have other opportunities. But
Yes, they do.
Not that one.
yeah.
As a kid, describe yourself. What were your interests? And what was a typical day after school, if there was such a thing, after you finished your paper route? What did you do with your time?
Okay. Well, in high school, after paper route, my good friends, Bullet, Jimmy Bullet Calorie, and Hank Sear, happened to live at the end of my paper route. And we would play basketball or football in the street until dark with some other fellas. And my typical day, John, was after I finished my paper route, involved sports. We had a little community center, and I learned how to bowl. But in eastern Massachusetts, you bowl candle pins, which are like candlestick-shaped pins, and you throw 3 balls instead of 2. And the ball is the size of maybe a softball or a grapefruit. And when you knock some pins down early, the wood, the pins that are on the ground, don't get picked up, and so that can become a hazard or an advantage. So I worked in the bowling alley I actually volunteered in the bowling alley. It was right around the corner from my house. It was 5 lanes in the basement of the community center. And the fellow that was responsible, the mechanic that was responsible, allowed me to bowl as much as I wanted to. And
That was one of the perks.
Yep, even though it was only 15 cents for a resident. And I learned how to bowl, and candlepin bowling became one of my passions in high school, and I became pretty good at it. Yeah, but my life was mostly revolved around sports.
It did?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So were you on teams while in high school? Did you participate that way?
I was. Baseball was my passion when I was in elementary and junior high school in Beacon, but I was pretty good too. But I wouldn't wear my glasses, just out of vanity. You know, I just wouldn't wear them. And as the pitchers got stronger, I stopped hitting. I couldn't hit.
Yeah.
I couldn't hit. So
Yeah.
I tried out for the varsity team in Massachusetts, a little town. I never told you the town. The town is Hopedale, Hopedale, Hopedale. And I lived in 21 Peace Street in Hopedale, and all the streets were named according in that vein. So I went out for baseball, and I realized after a short while that I wasn't going to make this team, and I was in the first cuts. So I decided I wanted to participate. So I took some of my paper route money and bought a beginner set of golf clubs and tried out for the golf team, and made the golf team as a scrub. And so I played golf, and I played a little basketball, JV.
Now, you're still a golfer, aren't you?
Yeah.
You still play, yeah.
But I'm still a hacker, though. And then
But you're
ran
not,
cross country.
but it's not competitive. I mean,
No.
you still, it's an enjoyment.
Oh, yes, it's a
hobby
lifetime
of yours
sport.
today. It's a lifetime sport. Yeah.
And I played some basketball. When I was in 10th grade, I was on the JV because our team was very, very good. And the varsity team was very good. They were excellent. They lost, I think, 5 games in 4 years or something like that. So we were playing a team in our league, Blackstone High School, which is down near the Rhode Island border. And sometimes I started, sometimes I didn't. I didn't start this game. And we got a lead at the end of the first quarter, so the coach put me in. And it was one of those games where everything was going right for our team and nothing was going right for them. And I played the rest of the game and had 16 points, only missed 1 shot. And the other team only scored 11. So my claim to fame, although nobody remembers it except me, is that I outscored the other team in a JV game in high school. And
Great memory.
yeah,
Terrific.
it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Did you have a particular holiday that was a big holiday in the family that you all celebrated together?
I think Thanksgiving was the biggest holiday. When we were in Beacon, we were, again, except for my father's mom and dad, most of our relatives were either on Long Island, my dad's family was on Long Island, or in New Jersey. When we were in Massachusetts, there was no one near us. So we always traveled to where the family was
Yes.
on Thanksgiving. And when we were in Beacon, it was either at my dad's mom and dad place, my grandmother on my dad's side place, or in New Jersey. So we always had large family gatherings. But it was never at our house because we were the farthest away.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think Thanksgiving was the biggest.
Was your family a religious family growing up? Was that an influence in your life?
My mom was very religious.
She was involved with. No, I'm thinking you. I'm sorry, Mike. Go
That's
ahead.
quite all right.
Go ahead.
My mom was very religious, although she got involved with some not fringe religions, but not mainstream religions. She was involved with a group called Unity, which is out of the Midwest, out in Kansas, I guess. My dad, although respected the Catholic Church and attended infrequently, considered himself to be, somewhat religious. The parents of my 3 friends, when I was living in Beacon, as I said, they were preachers and a preacher's wife. So, there was
That's
some
why I asked the
influence.
question, because there was that influence
Yeah,
that
yeah.
has affected you. And
And that's why I went to Eastern Nazarene College.
aha.
The father of my boyhood friends was on the board of directors, and I really had 2 or 3 choices to make as far as colleges were concerned when April came around of my senior year, and I really hadn't made a decision. And I came down to visit them for a week during vacation, and he said, "Where are you going to college?" And he said, "Well, I could go here or there, but I'm really not sure." And he said, "Well, why don't you go to Eastern Nazarene College and room with Glenn?" And I said, "Well, I never applied." And he said, "Well, don't worry about it. If you want to go, you can go." And so that's why I went there.
And life does open these doors for
It
us.
sure
doesn't it?
does. And that was sitting on the Staten Island Ferry. They were living in Staten Island at the time, and he was driving me back to Grand Central to take the train back home to Massachusetts.
Do you have a favorite season of the year, Mike?
I think fall, John, is my favorite season. I think maybe because you can count on the weather in fall. You really can. In springtime, and I love spring.
Yes.
I love the coming of, the greenery and the flowers and the anticipation of summer. But I think I like fall best. Every day.
There's a consistency.
Yes, there is. You can count on fall.
Yeah.
Fall's dependable, and fall can last. And Long
true.
Island can last.
That's true.
Into past Thanksgiving. So
That's true,
I like
yeah.
fall.
Are you? Do you consider yourself a morning person or a night person? And has that changed over the years? By the way, it might have been that at one time it was something else.
Well, I was never a night person. I was never a person who would to teach afternoon session so that after school they didn't have to worry about when they were going to sleep. I would consider myself a morning person. I like morning very, very much.
Yeah.
My wife has conditioned me that my definition of being a morning person is a little different than hers, and she's up at 6:15 or 6:30 every morning, and therefore I am. And I canceled my newspaper deliveries. I don't get Times or Newsday anymore, so that I purposely get dressed, get out, get the Times and Newsday around 7 or 7:15, so that my day gets started, and then I enjoy a nice long breakfast reading the paper. So I would say of the two, I guess I'm a morning person. I like morning better.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Are there particular aromas that will trigger a memory that takes you way, way back? Of course, sometimes these things have a brain function in all of us that you can pick up an aroma or a certain smell in the air and you are transported. Is there anything that does that for you?
Yeah, I can think of two, John. One, of course, is a spaghetti sauce, is a tomato sauce, slow cooking on the stove, and that's what I grew up with.
Yes.
Whether it was Grandma A or Grandma B, or my Aunt Louise or my Aunt Rose, or of course my mom, and my wife makes a wonderful sauce.
That's the smell of love, isn't it?
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Oh, and home and
Yeah.
oh, everything good.
Yes.
And although we don't get a chance, none of us get a chance to smell this aroma. Remember when we used to rake up the leaves into the street, onto the curb, and then burn them?
Remember it well.
Well,
Yes.
in places other than Long Island, upstate New York and in Vermont, over the last couple of years, I've had a chance to just whiff that smell.
Yeah.
And
That's football season.
oh yeah, it's football season, and it kind of might sound corny, but it kind of brought me back to when I was a kid, and I could smell that smell again.
That's right. That's right. Mike, I want to ask you the year that life first brought you to Brentwood.
1967. Yeah, 1967.
What brought you here? How come
Well,
Brentwood?
my wife is a lifelong Long Islander.
Mm-hmm.
From Nassau County, from Belmore. And so we both wanted to be teachers. We were graduating at the same time. So when it was time to send out some applications for jobs, we decided that it was going to be Long Island that we wanted where we wanted to work. So, John, I can't tell you. We may have seen advertisements in papers, but I can't remember why we picked out the school districts that we did. but we picked out Brentwood and Sayville and Middle Country, maybe one or two others. And we had an interview during spring break here in Brentwood, and Brentwood had, or Long Island had a blizzard, and there was no school. But we borrowed my wife's mother's car anyhow, and we drove out to Brentwood to the old administration building, and there was no one around, and no one had called us. And we had another interview in Middle Country, so we drove up there, and they were there, and we both had interviews. When we got back home to her mother's house, George Catandella called and said he was so apologetic, please come out tomorrow and let us interview you. So we came out the following day. There was still no school, but George and Lou Nanini interviewed Martha, and Fred Weaver and Gerhard Roberts interviewed me in two separate rooms in the old administration building. And my interview was going okay. I was trying to figure out what these guys really wanted me to say, Gerhard and Roberts and Fred Weaver. Fred was the high school principal at that time, as you know. And George Catandella comes out of the other meeting and interrupts Fred right in the middle of a sentence, puts his hand on his shoulder and says, he's hired. And Fred and Dr. Roberts were really taken back, and I didn't know what was going on. And Dr. Nanini said, it was either George or Dr. Nanini, said, yes, we're going to offer her a contract, and she said that you come as a package deal. So I'm not sure whether Brentwood would have hired me or not, John. I really never got the satisfaction of knowing whether they wanted me. But I must tell you that the look on Fred Weaver's face was priceless. So I got into Brentwood on my wife's coattails.
That's a great story. That's a wonderful story.
I still to this day don't know whether they would have hired me.
And they couldn't have made a better decision.
Oh, thank you.
And I know they discovered that after your first semester in the classroom, Mike. No question about that.
Well, thank you.
Some things are done on faith, and there's a
well,
perfect
that was
example.
a step of faith.
Yes.
Yeah.
Were there any questions that you remembered from the interview before you were so rudely interrupted?
John, I really don't.
No,
I don't remember. I remember the interview, and I remember where I was sitting in relationship,
Yes.
but
Okay. What are
I
the
don't.
first impressions you had now? You took the job, you showed up, and you came to work. And you had first impressions of the district, of the staff, of the students?
Well, John, you remember at that time we had a very large orientation in the Sonderling building, in the Sonderling auditorium, and then the cafeteria. Wade Cummings did a handstand before he said his few words at the microphone. I guess he was the AD at the time. There were, I don't know exactly how many, but there were way over 100 other new young
Yes.
whippersnappers
Yes.
at that time. You remember, that stretch where, they
do.
were filling out the faculty of this district. And my impression was that this is great. There are so many of us that are young that we're not getting into something that we can't handle. And
It's
we're
almost
looking
as if the
forward to it.
wheel has turned, isn't
Hasn't it, though?
it? Yeah.
Hasn't it?
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, to see all those young faces. Don't know anybody anymore when I come back. You
No.
hardly know a soul.
Yeah. Yeah.
So who did you work with, Mike, the first couple of years? Do you remember some of the people who may still be here?
Well, Sid Jones was my first department chairman. Paul Koretsky was my mentor. He taught in the adjacent room. Bob Wilcox and Harry Hayden. Harry started at the same time, and Bob was a big influence on my teaching. He was a great role model for a math teacher, for a young math teacher to be, because I wasn't a math teacher. I was just learning the ropes.
You came certified, did you, in
Yeah.
in mathematics?
In mathematics, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So, I
you,
think
when you
those-
say you weren't a math teacher, what you're
Oh, I
really
was.
saying is
Right.
that you had not yet acquired the skill that you did
Absolutely.
in years later.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I had a piece of paper that said
Yes.
provisional certification,
Okay.
but
Right.
I needed to learn what this was all about.
Students, as a student body, were a very different student body in those days.
Quite different, but
And by the way, you have seen, because you've lived here, you've lived in this district in a professional sense
Oh, I
for a
appreciate-
generation.
yeah.
You've seen the changes in the community. You've seen the changes in the faces before you.
Yes, yes. Brentwood has gone through a dramatic change, John, as we all know.
Yeah.
But it's still a
Is it
very
still
dynamic.
Is it still a microcosm of the country, Mike? I've heard people say this, and I've had others disagree vehemently and say it's more like an urban part of the country than it is like the whole country. And at this point, I don't think I'm qualified to say what it is.
Because since you've retired, John, it has changed quite a bit. John, as of last year, as of
Yes.
1999-2000, I would think it's more urban than a reflection on the entire country.
Is that
but-
because there are more and more youngsters that have come out from the city or come from other parts of the country or other cities that have moved here?
Could be. It could be. Although I do remember for a long time, students, someone would say that he or she came from this part of the city, and then all of a sudden half the class would
Yes.
enter into, remember?
Yes.
They would enter into a conversation about,
Yes.
oh, I came from here,
Yes.
do you know?
Yes. Not anymore, huh?
Yeah, I'm not sure, John. I'm really not sure. Of course, we have a larger percentage of immigrant young
Right.
men and women
Right.
that we've ever had before.
Now that means that they're coming directly here from some other part of the world.
Yes, that's right. That's
This
right.
is the first stop. This is not
This is the first stop.
from the barrio or from the inner city and then to Brentwood. They're coming straight to Brentwood.
It seems to me.
That would
yeah.
make all the difference in the world.
Yes, yes, it would.
Because it would suggest to me that there are some youngsters coming who might never have sat in a classroom before.
Yes, or whose formal education experience is quite limited. Yeah.
And therefore don't even have their own language of the country they're coming from,
Right.
to
Yes.
say nothing of the English language or the American culture.
If you speak to some of the ESL teachers that are here, you will hear them say that they, just as you surmise, that they have very limited native language skills as well.
And the numbers are increasing, Michael.
Yes, they are. But John, I think we do wonderfully. I think we do wonderfully with these children, and I think these children are lucky to be here.
And I will just reiterate what others in that chair have said. Miracles are performed here.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I feel very fortunate that I've been a little bit of part
Now,
of
what
it.
grades did you teach, Mike? What subjects did you teach? And tell
Well-
me about some of the positions that you've held along the line, too, because you've worn different hats at different times.
Okay. Well, I've spent my entire career on the secondary level here at Brentwood. Started in Sondling Building and taught either Sondling or Ross for up until the early or mid-'80s. And then you remember we created the two 10th grade centers, the East 10th grade center and the Northwest 10th grade center. And I spent a year in each and then came back.
Were you ever in the portables, Mike?
Yes,
you
the
were?
math department was
That's what I thought.
housed in the portables, both pre-fire portables, both editions of the portables. So we were housed there for a number of years. I imagine 10 years or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe longer. And the Ross staff, Ross math staff, had their classes in there. So I spent some of the best years of my life in the portable buildings.
The portables, which became very permanent until the fire.
Yes,
But
right.
that's what portables often do.
Yeah, yeah. Then I've taught just about every math class
Have you?
on the docket.
Ah.
Taught many of the computer classes, probably all of the computer classes. Then 1996 through September of 1999, I was the computer consultant for the high school. And then after Tony DeMarco had retired and Rich Spina had moved to a district-wide position. And then last year, I filled in for John Durant as math department chairman when John wasn't able to continue.
Yes.
Bob Wilcox and I were advisors to the Future Teachers of America. Ray Therian and I were advisors to the junior class back in the 70s.
Did you ever have any part-time jobs while you were teaching, Mike?
Yes, John. I moonlighted here in Brentwood in driver ed
Did you?
for a long time until that program was dropped from the district, eliminated by the district. And I've taught as an adjunct at SUNY Farmingdale and at C.W. Post in their Graduate School of Education, and then at Dowling.
Wow.
I did that for about 6 years, and
Are you still involved in any of those programs?
No, I'm not.
You're not?
No.
Okay.
no.
It sounds to me that you didn't have too much time. Did you do summer
No.
school or evening school?
I didn't do evening school, but I did summer school every year from 1972 until, well, I'm going to do summer school again.
You are.
So I'm going to continue. There was just 2 years that I didn't do summer school in the mid-'80s when Ray Newcomb and John Durant and I started a computer camp. And we ran a computer camp for 2 summers. And then we decided that we weren't making any money.
Okay.
We made enough to pay off all the equipment that we bought,
Oh, boy.
and made a little bit, and then I went back to summer school.
Yes. Okay. You haven't let any dust grow
Oh,
or
no,
any
John.
moss grow under your
No, I've-
under your shoes. You've been very busy. Do you? I was going to say, I want to think of a way to word this, and maybe I should make it a statement instead of a question. Watching you over the years, I can say in all honesty, I don't think you worked any harder your first year than you did in your last year. You didn't skip a beat. You were always very intensely involved with students, both in and outside the classroom, and you didn't seem to slow down at all. Was that your perception, or do you think that time and tide had taken some toll on the energy level?
John, I never I never really thought about it.
Well, then it never became a factor because
No,
it
I
just...
never really thought
no.
about it. And when I decided to retire, it wasn't because I had it and I had was completely worn out and I had to get away and I couldn't do this anymore. It was just that after 33 great years, I decided that...
That's what it was, 33 years. Mark.
Yeah. I decided that maybe I wanted to open up a few more avenues in my life. Yeah.
That
was the only reason.
Now that you look back, were you prepared when you came here as a teacher? Were you prepared to teach? Had you been prepared in the preparatory work that you had done?
I was prepared. Mathematically, I was prepared.
And experience taught you the rest.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And you have to be able, to change direction. You have to listen.
Very important.
You're right.
Very, very
Experience taught me the rest.
But it's listening, which is even more important.
That's right.
More than talking, more than teaching is listening. Just being open.
Yep. I've had I had the privilege of having 9 student teachers, John, and after a couple of them, I realized that I wanted to leave them with one thought. And the thought was that you have to look in the eyes of every one of your students every day. You have to make sure you look in their eyes, and you have to figure out what they're thinking, because they're not very good actors and actresses. And you can tell. You can tell how good you're explaining, how well you're explaining this particular concept. You can tell whether they're bored. You can tell whether you have to slow down or pick it up. So look into their eyes and pay attention to what they're saying.
As a cooperating teacher, my recollection is that you weren't paid for that, but you were given an opportunity to take courses in graduate level.
Right.
Did you do that?
I did it. My wife took some courses.
Okay. All right, because I would say that your level at this point, you have a master's degree.
Master's, yes, a master's in math and certification in supervision and administration, and
the work required to have a student teacher, for those people who are listening and may not know, is incredible. The amount of work in addition to your normal classroom activities. And for somebody to have come back and be willing, that's missionary work that you did.
Well, in a sense, but I was blessed with having, most of them were just terrific.
Unbelievable to me, Mike. That's excellent. Wow. So now, the big question here is, your job description was, no matter what you were doing, whether it was in the computer area, whether it was as a classroom teacher, we always had a job description that defined for the community who were paying the bills what they were going to get for what kind of bang they were getting for their buck, so to speak. But more importantly, you came in with a purpose of your own, which may have evolved over the years, or it may have remained, as you have, to my perception, incredibly consistent and focused. What was your purpose? What was your reason for being in the classroom, primarily in the classroom?
Well, John, to be honest, when I started out, I didn't know. I didn't know what my purpose was. I mean, here I am. I'm thrilled that I'm making $63.40 a year and have a job, and I'm working with young people, but I think you hit it on the nose when you said that my purpose evolved. I think all of us in this line of work, if we look at the purpose of our jobs is helping these children to get to another place,
yes.
And if we do it the best possible way, that it's going to be much easier for them to get to another place. then that's our purpose. And I always looked at it that way, John. There was
So to try to uncover or to evolve what you want, what your purpose as a student, where are you going?
yeah, right, right.
And let me help you
Not
get
me,
there.
right? Yeah,
It's
That's
about
it.
them. It's not about you. It's about
absolutely,
them.
absolutely. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more with what you just said. Do you have the opportunity every once in a while to have contact with some of your former students or with even some of your former teachers, Mike? Have you maintained any kind of connection with them or with your former students?
John, I'm as old now as I thought my teachers were when I was in high school. So most of my teachers are deceased.
Yes.
I did keep in touch for a short period of time with some of them. I do have a number of students from over the years that I have kept in contact with. As a matter of fact, a young man, John Saravio, is taking the selective service exam on Thursday. And so I've been tutoring him and helping him. He's a New York City police officer, and he drives in from Queens, and he graduated 9 years ago. So
you have
there's a number of them.
you have evolved past the point of being a teacher. Now you're a mentor.
Yeah, mentors, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
That's wonderful.
hopefully I'll get an invitation to the White House out of it. My wife and I will get an invitation to the White House out of it.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and I enjoy that role, John.
You have actually been, I guess, officially retired from your teaching for a year, and have been doing something else, which we'll talk about in this preceding year. But I want to ask you a little bit about, while you were a classroom teacher and while you were active, did you have any involvement with the union or with the BTA, or when you came, I don't recall when the union first came.
There was, John.
There was a
Dave
union when you
Marks was the president of the union, and I remember him giving us an address at orientation. So there was a
union,
there
and
was
he
an
was at that
organized
point at
BTA.
least partially paid for his role. It wasn't a volunteer position. I think at that point it had evolved
wasn't.
into a part-time, not
Yeah.
a full-time position.
Because David was still a
In the
physics
classroom.
teacher
Okay.
at that time. Physics or chemistry. He was a science teacher. At
Now,
the time.
did you wait until you had tenure before you became involved in any way, or did you have time to become involved?
Well, early in my career, I really didn't have time
Yes.
to become involved. But we had some wonderful people that were involved for us, and I was very supportive.
Mm-hmm.
I served on a number of district-wide committees for the BTA, one of which was the sabbatical leave committee.
You did?
I served
Oh.
on that for a couple of years. Some district-wide curriculum committees. And I have nothing but the highest regard
Yes.
for the BTA leadership.
That's dedicated service,
Oh,
unquestionably. The time investment in that is incredible, yeah.
And I think they have served us so well.
And of
I
course,
re-
you knew, you mentioned Dr. Nannini before, but you also were here and saw the rise to central administration of one of our own Guy Di Pietro, who became
Absolutely.
superintendent from the ranks of the classroom.
Right.
And you were present when he brought to the table this formula to eliminate the hassle every contract period.
Right, right.
One of the best things that ever happened in this district.
Because I remember all of us meeting at the Colony Hill. Remember a couple of days before school was to
Just
start.
before Labor Day. Right?
Just before Labor Day, and the tension, and the
and the picketing
and yeah
around central administration.
right after school,
Yeah.
and I have close friends that are teachers in other districts, and they are truly jealous
Yes.
at the relationships that we have,
Yes.
that the BTA and the faculties and Central have in our district. And they look at me as if to say, this can't happen. This
Yeah.
doesn't happen on Long Island.
Oh, we've had our times
Oh,
when
yes.
we have been at odds with the board or segments of the community.
No
But
question.
for the most part, what you've just described is the way it has been throughout
That's right.
our experience here.
And I think we're very fortunate
Yeah.
that it has that it
Agreed.
has worked out that way from Guy on.
Agreed, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I could ask you to do this, Mike, but I don't want to put you on the spot. It's unfair to ask you to describe,
Why
to,
stop
to,
now,
to
John?
single out certain people, but we've all had our share of lovable characters. You know, I'll call them that because I think there are many ways of defining people that we've known that have been different. Everybody who was here has at least one Fred Weaver story. Everybody has a Stan Yankowski story. We have Alfred Miller stories. We have
Dr. Miller, yes.
We have stories about. I don't want to prejudice what you might say by suggesting what you talk about, but there are certain dates. By the way, as part of that, maybe, or instead of that, and I give you the carte blanche to say anything you want, you've also taught during some very traumatic historical events in the last several decades. The assassinations back in '68, the Challenger disaster. There have been a number of other things that have impacted on morale and on the immediate dynamics of school. But I guess what I'm mining for here are those memories that will, at this moment in time, pop to the surface and say, well, I remember such and such, whatever it might be, if you can draw on anything. Boy, I talked a long time.
John, you've really got me. You know, of course I can remember, you know, the morning after, you know, that morning when Dr. King was assassinated, and you know, the feeling of the school, you know, after just hearing and seeing Bobby Kennedy.
Yes.
And
who was here, who came.
that's right.
Who landed
That's
out
what
on
I
the
meant.
football field.
In a helicopter, and you know, sat and made sure that he heard what the orchestra could play, you know, before he left.
And he spoke at the Ross Auditorium, was
right.
on the stage.
Yes, right. And I remember how we felt after that happened. And John, I don't know if I can come up with anything.
It doesn't matter, Mike, because you've
that-
already given us that moment in time. Is
There were so many of them.
Sure there were.
You know, and
Sure there were.
and you know, things that, you know,
The Vietnam experience.
Yeah.
I've lived through so many.
and then, you know, celebratory things, you know, that happened to, you know, our favorite sports teams, you know, and the reactions
Yes.
of the students and the faculty, or, you know, that happened to some of the faculty or students, you know,
Mike, there was a time.
Westinghouse scholarships and things
Exactly.
like that.
Exactly.
There are so many, John.
Yeah.
I don't think I can narrow it down.
That's why I said I felt funny about even asking because
That's okay.
there are so many things. You were teaching when there was you were teaching here when it was not considered fair game to bring a calculator into the classroom
Oh,
or
yes.
into a test. You couldn't bring a hand
Right.
calculator. And you saw the evolution to the whole computer technology. It's remarkable that all of this has been capsulized in one lifetime, but it's been so fast.
Oh,
Okay. You began to think about that maybe there were other things that you'd like to do with the time remaining, and you decided that, I don't know whether it was an incentive-based decision or whether it wasn't, but at a certain point you decided, I think I'm going to retire, and you and your wife talked about it, and you made a decision, however, and you moved to retire in, what year was it,
In
2000?
2000,
In
June
year
2000.
Were you both agreeable that that was the way to go, or was there a discussion for a while?
Well, I had decided much earlier than Martha. I had decided that at 55, I was going to change my life. I don't mean to imply that my life needed changing, but I wanted to have more options in my life. Martha thought that she would teach until 62. And so I had put in my papers the year and a half ahead of time, and I was hoping that Martha would retire as well, but I didn't want to influence her in any way. And Sachem never had an incentive. And last April, they sent out all the retiree eligible people on staff a notice that there was going to be a one-time incentive this year. And Martha never opened it. And she was in the high school, in Sachem High School at the time. And her principal, a couple of days later, told her that her 120 student ninth grade chorus was going to be moved to 8th period from 1st period. And she said, I don't know if I want my chorus to be 8th period. There are so many things going on 8th period, and I have them 1st period. I have all their energy. I don't know how much energy they will have 8th period. So my wife decided about 8 weeks before retirement time that she was going to retire, and she did. And she has about a dozen private students and her 3 choirs, and she's very happy that she did.
And there's still not enough time to do everything she wants to do. Yeah.
So it wasn't incentive driven, John, although it
knew
sure helped.
You knew it was time, though. You
Yes.
felt like it was
I felt
time.
it was time.
Yeah.
But the incentive sure helped to pay for my daughter's
Okay.
wedding in September. Okay.
What have you been doing since?
Well, there are some things that are getting done around the house, little things, John, that I'm not very handy, but there's some little things that are getting done around the house that didn't get done. I'm doing some volunteer work at church, and I'm also become the financial secretary at church. And I'm able to spend a little more time with my horse racing hobby, which I like to do.
That's been a hobby of yours for quite some time.
Yes, I know you know that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I knew you were a golfer, and I also knew you like to follow the races.
Yeah.
And were knowledgeable and have been knowledgeable.
Well,
When
thank
did
you.
you get that interest? How long has that been in your life?
It's been in the back of my mind since I think Secretariat in 1973. I was just I didn't grow up in a horse racing family, but I remember my wife and I watching Secretariat, and I'm thinking how beautiful his performance in the Belmont was, but it didn't come until about a year later when I was tutoring, and I got $20 that I didn't have, 10 minutes ago, and I decided, okay, I'm going to play with that $20 and see what happens. And I absolutely knew nothing about the things that are important to being a successful handicapper. And I got down to my last $5 or $6, and I won $170. And maybe if that $20 had disappeared, maybe I wouldn't be playing the horses today. But I love it, and I make a couple of pilgrimages to to Saratoga during the summer with both my family and some friends, and I've enjoyed it, and
you
my
have fun
children
with it,
enjoy
yes.
it too.
I said, and you have fun with it.
Oh, absolutely. And my daughter and son and I and my wife have had wonderful times
That's
at
great.
the races. Just wonderful. Yeah.
Tell me about this past year and how that came together, where you have been, you've retired, but you've come back to work.
Well,
Or you never left work, as a matter of fact, really.
well, the work that I've been doing is just occasionally filling in, helping Dennis Bracco and Charlotte Deschamps in the evening high school office. And that's only maybe 3 or 4 times a month. So it's really not an awful lot, John.
I see.
But
I was under the impression that this was almost an every other day, but it
Oh, no.
wasn't. It's
No.
intermittent. Okay.
yeah, it's intermittent. It's very intermittent. But I am going to...
You're working with some pretty nice people there.
Wonderful people. But I'm going to have to start getting up at 5:15 in the morning, July and August, because I'm going to work with them in summer, in the front
okay.
office
Yes.
during summer school.
Mike, of all the things that you've accomplished, is there something that you're the most proud of or feel the greatest satisfaction about having done?
Well, John, the obvious answer is, being a husband and a dad. But
Why did
I
I
think-
know you were going to say that? See,
Well,
even though I
but-
didn't gear you into the professional end of it, why did I know you were going to say that? Because I know you, that's why.
I think so, John. We've known each other very well for a long, long time. John, I think I just think, I don't mean to sound trite, but I think that being here for 33 years, being in Brentwood for 33 years, and developing this relationship with a wonderful family of colleagues that I just couldn't have imagined 33, 34 years ago, and how important they've become in my life. And I don't know, the 7,000 students that have
Yes.
crossed my life, and
Yes.
and they really have. Everyone has crossed my life.
Yes.
Has made an impression on my life, and some of them still are. That I think I'm most proud of the fact that I haven't taken that for granted.
There's another aspect to this as well. Of this Brentwood family that you refer to, including the students, of course, but the aides, the clericals, the custodial and cafeteria people, as
Oh,
well as
absolutely.
the
All of us.
administrators, that sometimes get an unfair rap from teachers, just as sometimes teachers get an unfair rap from some of our administrative colleagues. I would say that it's important for us all to remember that there are some students for whom even the worst teacher we might think is the worst teacher is their favorite teacher for whatever
Absolutely.
reason. Everybody is in somebody else's life to serve a reason or a purpose. And you've had an opportunity to wear several hats, both as an acting administrator and as a classroom teacher. I don't know what you might want to say about that experience and the realities that are different, or the experiences are different, that might clear up some of the misperceptions that exist, and they do exist. Do you have any added insight after this past year or after the last couple of years?
Well, I pretty much knew what the department chairmanship and the administrative and that part of administration was going to be like. I pretty much knew it. And I wasn't surprised very much at all last year. But I told a lot of my colleagues last year, what I would wish is that every one of you could sit in this chair for 1 year. And because we're all in this together, and we just have to remember that. And that's the only way we're going to make it work, is if we realize that we're all in this together. And I have this piece to do, and you have that piece to do. And, you know, this person has another piece that's important.
And let's be kind to one another.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Is there something, and maybe this is the same question, I don't mean it to be asked another way, but was there something throughout your professional life that gave you the most pleasure? I mean, there are things that none of us like about what we had to do. There are
Right.
things that we don't like, but there are things that we really do find fun.
Well, John, things like, and I can remember the young man, I can see the young man, but unfortunately I can't remember his name. The young man in the middle of a classroom, in the middle of a class, looking up at the clock and saying, "This period is over already?" You know,
Yes,
that,
yes,
or
yes.
Dana, the young girl, 10 or 15 years ago, sitting in a senior math class saying, "You know, Mr. Campanile, I never liked math." Things like that, John.
Yes, yes. That in
Could-
great respect is that's payday.
Oh,
as
it
you
sure
might
is,
say.
John. And as you can see, I've remembered it from all of
Exactly.
these years, just those little things.
Mike, there are so many other things that I would love to ask you. I don't know if we've left anything out that
I
you
can't
think
imagine that we have, John.
that would be important to mention before we leave here today. Was there anything that you would like to have accomplished that you couldn't get to?
Sure, everyone passing the Regents, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't look at it that way, that there isn't anything that we didn't do. that I
If there
would
was,
rather.
if there was something that you could say to young teachers who are perhaps there now or are coming in very shortly and may see this at some future date, is there something by word of advice or experience that you could offer that might be helpful to them?
Well, other than look in their eyes, and
Yes.
I would think probably just be honest with yourself. Just be honest with yourself, and you'll know. And never use the same lesson plan twice. Use it as a guideline, but it can always be better.
It
think that's
remains
it.
for me to thank you for being with us,
Oh, you're
Mike.
welcome,
I hope it
John.
hasn't been too painful.
It
my
hasn't.
experience.
I've been watching you go away from our conversations off to do these interviews for years, and I have actually been looking forward to doing it. Thank you very
Mike.
much.
Thanks.
Thanks.